Give me your phone. My dad stood in the doorway with his work laptop clutched against his chest. One corner cracked open like it had been dropped hard. Rain hammered the driveway behind him. I stared at him. Dad, I didn't touch it. Marcus stood a few feet behind him, arms folded. He did this, my dad said. He told me exactly what happened. I looked at my brother. Why are you lying? Dad's face changed instantly. Don't you dare blame him because you got caught. I was upstairs doing homework. Enough. He held out his hand until I surrendered my phone. Then he opened the front door wider. You're not welcome in this house. For 1 second, I actually thought he was trying to scare me. Then he grabbed my backpack from beside the stairs and tossed it outside. It landed on the wet concrete. That was when I realized my father wasn't threatening to throw his 15-year-old daughter out into a storm. He was actually doing it. Marcus had told him I stormed into Dad's office after being told I couldn't go out with friends, grabbed the laptop in anger, and knocked it off the desk. The story was detailed. Almost too detailed. And Dad believed every word. Mom wasn't home. She was spending the night with her sister at the hospital, which meant there was nobody there to slow him down or ask why Marcus's version was the only version that mattered. I tried once more. Dad, please, I never even went into your office. You always have an excuse. I'm telling you the truth. And I'm done listening. Marcus didn't look at me. That hurt more than I expected. He knew. Whatever had happened to that laptop, he knew I hadn't done it. I could have screamed at him. I could have begged Dad to believe me. But years of hearing, stop talking back, had taught me exactly what happened when I defended myself too hard. So I stopped. I put on my shoes, stepped into the rain, picked up my soaked backpack, and walked. Dad expected me to circle the block and come crawling back. I kept going. Several streets later, I reached my best friend Maya's house drenched from head to toe. Her mother, Denise, opened the door and froze. Cindy, what happened? I could barely answer. But while she pulled me inside and grabbed a towel, one detail kept replaying in my head. Before Dad shut the door, Marcus had pointed at the laptop and said the left corner hit first. Dad had never shown him the damage. So how did Marcus already know? I stayed at Maya's house that night. Denise gave me dry clothes, made me hot chocolate, and called my mom. By the time Mom answered, she already knew something was wrong from Denise's voice. Elaine, Cindy is here. There was a pause. Then Mom said, What do you mean she's there? Denise looked at me before answering. Richard put her out. Mom went silent. A few minutes later, she called Dad. I could hear only Denise's side of the conversation, but I didn't need the rest. No, Richard, she's 15. Pause. I don't care what you thought she did. Another pause. You put her outside in the rain. Dad apparently insisted I hadn't been really kicked out. He said he was teaching me a lesson. He claimed he expected me to walk around for a few minutes, cool off, then come home. Mom didn't accept that. She called me directly. Cindy, come home. I tightened my grip on the phone. I don't want to. Mom went quiet. I had never said that before. Not about home. Not about Dad. Not about anything. I don't feel safe coming back if Dad's still going to believe Marcus, no matter what I say. That changed the conversation. Mom stopped trying to convince me. Instead, she arranged for me to stay with Aunt Rachel for a few days. The next afternoon, Marcus finally texted me. I expected an apology. Instead, I got, You're making this way bigger than it needs to be. I stared at the message. Then I typed back, How did you know which corner of the laptop hit the floor? The typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then nothing. That silence made me remember something else. Earlier that day, before Dad came home, I had walked past his office. The door had been closed. I heard movement inside and assumed Dad had come home early. But now, I remembered seeing Marcus's sneakers outside the door. I told Mom. She immediately asked Dad whether Marcus had permission to use the laptop. His answer was instant. No, Marcus knows better. I already told him never to touch it after he installed that software last month. Mom pressed him. Then, why aren't you asking him if he was in your office? Dad got defensive. Because Marcus told me what happened. That's not what I asked. For the first time, someone was forcing Dad to look at the gaps in Marcus's story. And instead of getting curious, he got angry. That scared me more than the shouting had. If Dad really wanted the truth, why did every question about Marcus make him defensive? That night, one more message came through. From Marcus. Dad already decided what happened. Just leave it alone. I read it 3 times. Then I realized something. Maybe Marcus wasn't the only person protecting the lie. 2 weeks after my father pushed me into the rain, the story everyone at school knew was completely different from what actually happened. I walked into the cafeteria and immediately noticed the whispers. At first, I ignored them. Then I heard my name. She's the girl who smashed her dad's laptop. I stopped. A girl from my history class looked away when she realized I heard. I walked over to her. Who told you that? She hesitated. Marcus. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just that my brother had lied to Dad. He had taken the lie outside our house. He had turned me into the problem. By lunch, I found out he had been telling people I got angry, destroyed the laptop, and ran away because I didn't want to face consequences. The same person who caused me to lose my home for a night was now making sure everyone believed I deserved it. One student even laughed as I sat down and said, "Maybe we should hide our laptops when you're around." I didn't respond. I picked up my tray and moved to another table. I knew exactly what Marcus wanted. He wanted me to explode. He wanted another story he could tell. Meanwhile, Mom was still trying to understand what happened. She confronted Dad again. Did you even check the laptop? Dad looked uncomfortable. That was the first sign something had changed. Finally, he admitted he had sent it for repair. The technician had found something important. The damage happened several hours before the time Marcus claimed I broke it. Mom stared at him. So Marcus's timeline doesn't work. Dad shrugged. He probably got the time wrong. But Mom wasn't convinced. Because this wasn't a small mistake anymore. Dad wasn't searching for the truth. He was protecting the decision he had already made. That weekend, Dad invited some friends over. Marcus was there. I was still staying with Aunt Rachel. During dinner, Dad turned what happened to me into a story. A joke. He laughed while describing how I stood in the doorway and walked into the rain. Sometimes kids need consequences, he said. His friends gave uncomfortable smiles. Then one of them asked, but what if she didn't actually do it? Dad leaned back. Honestly, Marcus's story wasn't perfect. Moments later, he added, but after she walked out, I wasn't going to chase her. The room went quiet. Then Marcus looked toward the hallway. His face changed. Because someone had just walked through the back door. And she had heard everything. Elaine was standing behind my father. Mom didn't say anything at first. She just stood there. Dad slowly turned around, and the smile disappeared from his face. The same man who had been laughing about throwing his 15-year-old daughter into the rain suddenly looked like he wanted to explain himself. Elaine. Mom raised her hand. Don't. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Mom looked directly at Dad. You knew Marcus's story didn't make sense. Dad shook his head quickly. No, I mean I had doubts afterward. Mom stepped closer. Afterward. Her voice was calm, but that made it worse. After you sent her outside. Dad looked away. I was angry. That's not an answer. Marcus slowly started walking toward the stairs. Mom noticed. Marcus, stay where you are. He stopped. For the first time, he looked nervous. Mom turned toward him. Tell me exactly what happened to the laptop. Marcus swallowed. I already told Dad. No, tell me. He looked at Dad. Dad opened his mouth. Mom immediately stopped him. No, he can answer. Marcus shifted. I saw Cindy near the office. Mom stared at him. Earlier, you said she went inside after Dad yelled at her. Marcus hesitated. It happened around then. Around then. The room became silent. Mom shook her head. Funny, because you knew the exact side of the laptop that hit the floor. Marcus froze. Mom continued. How did you know that? Nobody answered. Then Marcus made a mistake. A small one. But it changed everything. Because that's the side that hit first. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Dad looked at him. Mom looked at him. Even his own friends' faces changed. Marcus immediately tried to recover. I mean, Cindy must have told me. Mom didn't blink. She never described the fall. Marcus said nothing. Because he knew she was right. Cindy had never told anyone how the laptop landed. She couldn't. She wasn't there. Mom picked up her phone. I'm calling Cindy. Dad stepped forward. Elaine, we can handle this privately. Mom looked at him. Number Cindy was humiliated publicly. She was blamed publicly. You laughed about it publicly. She pressed the call button. A few seconds later, my voice came through. Mom. Mom put the phone on speaker. I heard voices in the background. Then, Mom said the one thing I had been waiting 2 weeks to hear. You were telling the truth. I didn't answer immediately. I just sat there holding the phone. Because hearing those words from my mother felt different from proving myself. It meant someone finally believed me. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my mind since the night Dad opened that door. Does Dad know that? The room on the other end went silent. Mom looked at my father. And for the first time since I walked into the rain, my dad had no answer. For 2 weeks, my father had convinced himself that what happened was just a mistake. But now there was nowhere left for him to hide. Mom looked at him and waited. Tell her. Dad stayed silent. Tell Cindy what you knew. He lowered his eyes. Finally, he spoke. The repair technician found something wrong with the timeline. My grip tightened around the phone. Dad continued. The laptop had damage information that showed it happened earlier than Marcus said. A silence followed. Not the angry silence from the night I left. A different kind. The kind where everyone already knew the truth, but one person was still trying to avoid saying it. Mom asked the question I had been waiting for. So you knew Marcus might have lied. Dad rubbed his forehead. I suspected. Then why didn't you call her? He didn't answer. Because there was no answer that would make it acceptable. He had already made his decision. He had already thrown me out. He had already told people I was the problem. Admitting he was wrong meant admitting he had failed me. And instead of facing that, he chose silence. Mom turned toward Marcus. Now you tell the truth. Marcus shook his head. I didn't mean for this to happen. That's not what I asked. His confidence was gone. The same confidence he had when he stood behind Dad while I stood in the rain. I borrowed the laptop. Dad's face changed. Marcus continued. I just wanted to use it for something. What something? Mom asked. He looked down. A game. Dad had already warned him not to install anything on the laptop after a previous problem. Marcus knew exactly how angry Dad would be. He had gone into the office anyway. Then Dad called unexpectedly, and Marcus panicked. He unplugged everything too quickly. The laptop slipped. It hit the desk, then the floor. And when he heard me coming downstairs, he saw a way out. I thought Dad would believe me, Marcus admitted quietly. That sentence hurt more than the lie itself, because it meant he wasn't just afraid. He knew exactly who would be blamed. Me. I heard everything through the phone. Then I asked Dad one question. Why didn't you call me when you started doubting him? Nobody answered. Finally, Dad whispered. I was wrong. It was the first time I had heard him say those words. But an apology didn't erase the rain. It didn't erase the walk. It didn't erase the moment I realized my own father could believe someone else's lie over my truth. Mom told me I could come home. But I had one condition. Things could not go back to the way they were. No more punishments because Marcus sounded convincing. No more assuming I was guilty because I was the quieter child. And no more using the word family as a reason I had to accept being treated unfairly. Mom agreed immediately. Dad took longer. But eventually, he did too. And that was the beginning of everything changing.